Hi, I'm Barry Dowsett. I'm the CEO of Myriad. There's lots of changes going on in the world of R&D tax relief at this moment, but there's nothing bigger than the merging of two schemes. You have the SME scheme that's going to merge with the RDEC, that's reserved for large companies. So you've got the SME and the RDEC scheme, they're coming together. That's effective from the 1st of April 2024. Now, HMRC and Customs have just launched some additional guidance related to contracted out activities and also about overseas R&D activities. Now, the purpose of this video is to go through those two key changes and the guidance and the interpretation of that guidance. I'm going to go through those at a reasonably high level. We do have a blog post. There's a link in the description that goes into much more detail. So please go and have a look at that. As I said, the link's in the description. So here we go. So effective from accounting period starting on or after the 1st of April 2024. That is when the MERS scheme comes into play. Remember, it's accounting period starting on or after the 1st of April 2024. So it may be some time before this would impact your R&D tax claims. However, planning is extremely important. You find out more why by continuing to listen to this video. So with the MERS scheme, we also know that there's an SME intensive scheme that was launched on the 1st of April 2023. You had to be, your R&D costs had to be 40% or more in terms of being able to apply for that scheme. It gave you more relief, it was more generous. Now that threshold of R&D intensity to total cost is being reduced from 30%. That's also effective from the 1st of April 2024. That's accounting period starting or after. So we're going to actually have two schemes still. We're going to have the merge scheme and we're going to have the SME intensive scheme. Now it's a shame that it didn't take the opportunity here to bring the SME intensive scheme into the merge scheme as well. So we end up with just the one scheme. Hopefully that will happen at a later point. We are certainly suggesting that under consultation with HMRC and Customs. So some key changes for this new merge scheme. And the first one is that subsidised cost and grant income no longer need to be deducted from R&D expenditure. That's extremely important for SMEs, and that's a big change here in terms of them being able to claim those costs now. Now, there's also these new rules. These new rules about contracted out R&D activities, which I'm going to run through in a minute, and they've also got R&D activities performed overseas are generally disallowed. Okay. Now, points 2 and 3, the contracted out and the activities performed overseas, there was draft guidance issued on the 8th of Feb, and the consultation for that has just closed. That was on the 1st of March. Put in quite a lot of pressure on trying to get these changes launched for the 1st of April, and the finance bill legislation has been drafted. So this is not the final position. Things may change, but I think we're getting close. Okay, so contracted out R&D activities. Now, who can claim? Is it the company or is it the contractor? The general principle is that it will be the entity that is initiating the R&D that will get the relief. So if the company is initiating, that's through its intention or is contemplating R&D to be carried out by the contract, the company can claim the expenditure. If it's not reasonable to assume that the customer intended or contemplated R&D and the contractor initiates the R&D, then the contractor may claim. Now, what is interesting in these guidance is the proof of burden is required. It seems to be with the company, not the contractor. Let me just take you through that. It's quite interesting. So what legislation requires is an assessment to be made of regards to the contractual terms and any surrounding circumstances. So this word intended or contemplated is extremely important. So surrounding circumstances might be IP ownership, financial risk, autonomy, decision-making, experience of the competent professional, seniority of decision makers, etc. And what they're saying, HMRC and Customs, in their guidance is that for the customer to claim that contractor's invoice, which also be strictest to, I believe, at 65%, they will need some more than just what's high level wording. It's not enough. They need to articulate the R&D to be undertaken. They need to say they need to be able to state the advance in science or technology and what technical uncertainties need to be addressed. What's going to be key in this is evidence and documentation, no doubt about it. So supply contracts should stipulate the R&D to be undertaken. Any discussions you have with contractors need to be logged. Project documentation should be expanded upon to explain the R&D that's required, the desired results, milestones. I mean, documentation is key. So I would probably, suggest you look at your supply chain here, see what documentation you have in place, determine whether you need to strengthen that documentation if you want to claim contractors' costs. As I said, the burden of proof here, i.e. the evidence, seems to be on the company, not the contractor. Okay, so now we're going to talk about R&D activities overseas. So this relates to contractors and externally provided workers. So that's agency workers from a staff agency. Okay, they would generally no longer qualify for R&D tax relief under this new merged scheme. What is interesting is that you can still claim for your staffing costs, those under PAYE, NI, consumables, software, data and cloud computing, and any payments to clinical trial participants for overseas R&D activities. So the restriction here is only on contractors and externally provided workers for overseas R&D activities. Okay. Now there are some exceptions to the rule. And the key here is that the condition necessary for the R&D is not present in the UK, and it would be wholly unreasonable for a company to replicate those conditions in the UK. Now, sometimes that's pretty obvious. So it could be that there's a medical, physical, geophysical circumstance not present in the UK. It could be for legal, regulatory requirements. There may be certain frameworks in place in countries that you have to be present to take the R&D in order to conform with them. But one they have mentioned is interesting, is timescale. So the example that's given is if a UK test facility is unavailable and it's unreasonable for the company to replicate this within the project timescale, then that would be a reason for it being wholly unreasonable for the company to replicate the R&D in the UK. Now, there are other examples, which, as I said, if you look at our blog post, we provide that, or if you look at the HMRC and Customers Guidance that was recently launched, you'll see those on there as well. Now, what is not considered an exception to the rule? There's two key areas. The cost of R&D activity and the availability of workers to carry out the R&D activities. They're very explicit on that. So if it's simply just a cost factor or availability of the workers to carry out the R&D activity, then you would not be exempt from these rules here. Now, what they have said though, and this is, once again, this is interesting, they have said that if there's another circumstance beyond, for example, the cost of the R&D activity, so let's say there is a timescale issue, then that, and it can be considered as being an exception to the rule, then you would be able to claim R&D. So if it's not, what we're trying to say here, if it's not the only reason, i.e. cost or availability of workers, but there are some other plausible reasons that would allow you to have an exemption, then you would be able to make the R&D claim. Okay, now it's quite a lot to take in here. What I would say is that documentation is very, very key. So I would suggest you look at your supply chain in terms of the contracted out activities and your overseas activities. Make sure that you've got the relevant evidence in place. Check whether you need to update your contracts. Also check to see if there are any of the exemptions in regarding the overseas activities would apply to you. Now, of course, as always, if you need any help or further advice on R&D tax, this particular area or any area, you can reach out to me. There's my email. You can contact our main telephone number as well. Yeah, I really hope you've enjoyed listening to this. These are big changes, the merger of the two schemes, and there's, as I said, there's some important new rules coming out and guidance which are important to understand. Hope you enjoyed listening. Thank you.